Welcome to the Active Later Life. My name is Martin and I'm here to encourage us all to live our active later life. So if you're in your 40s, your 50s, your 60s or even older, then you've come to the right place. Now in my previous two videos I talked about how a photograph I took of my wife made me realise that I was not doing much to take care of myself and how I'd need to make some changes if I were to live a healthy and fulfilled later life, and also how I started running as a way to fulfill that. Now my biggest fear was, would I have the persistence to keep it up? I mean, I did join a gym a few years ago, but a few weeks later I just gave it up. So I don't have a good track record in that. And as a kid, I really was not the most sporty of kids. I mean, sure, I would kick a ball around to the park with my friends on the weekend, but to be honest, I was pretty terrible at it. You know, I was the kid in school that was always picked last on any team, the kid that could never catch a ball.
It's gonna be a long season.
You know, on school sports day, I was last to finish in any race, or one of the back ones anyway. And given the choice, if I was given the choice of the computer lab, the library, or the sports field, I would always pick the lab or the library. I would never pick the sports field given the option. If you were to go back in time to our middle school classroom and pick up the one kid who's most likely to ever complete a marathon, you would not have picked out me. But guess what? Spoiler alert, at the age of 52 years old, I actually completed the LA Marathon and I have the t-shirt and the medal to prove it. Now going back to the beginning, after my first run, I realized that a pair of old sneakers and a Led Zeppelin t-shirt was probably not going to cut it for running. And as a kid, I was kind of a bit of a Nike nerd, so I went to the Nike store in town to get myself kitted out. No, I don't recommend that you do that, although I've got to say that there's nothing actually wrong with Nike running shoes. After all, they've been around for a long time and they make some very good products. And my experience at the store was also very good. The sales assistant measured my feet and got the shape of my foot in some kind of machine. And he looked at my running style or gait and picked out a pair of shoes that are actually worked out very well for me. Now, the reason I wouldn't recommend doing what I did is because you're better off going to an independent running store that deals with multiple brands and talk to a specialist there, and they can pick out the perfect shoe for you. I mean, you can't go wrong with any of the entry-level shoes that are out there, but why limit yourself? And not only that, most of the running stores are owned by runners themselves, so therefore they can answer any of your questions. Well, having the right gear was a great first step because at least it meant that I was invested. But would my running shoes end up sitting in the closet unused, or would I end up using them? Well, only time will tell, but I can happily say that I have worn out multiple pairs of running shoes over the last 5 years of being active. But you know what, having the gear was not the thing that kept me going back. I mean, in my 30s I joined a gym and I paid a monthly subscription, but I gave it up after a few weeks. Although I kept the subscription going for several months later, I was financially invested, but I was not personally invested. For me, there just was nothing fun about going to the gym. You know, it just felt like an exercise factory with the boring repetitions. And I'd done some factory work when I was between jobs at one point in my life. And the repetitious work of just putting something on a machine, taking it off, putting it on, taking it off. Well, the gym felt exactly the same to me like that. And I think also for me, you know, going to the gym was kind of just like me, myself and I just working out, trying to get fit. And it wasn't very social. I mean, sure, I could have got a personal trainer, and I get that today there's more social gyms out there like Orange Theory or CrossFit or the martial arts style workouts that you can do. But back then, there really wasn't so much of that kind of thing, or not that I could find anyway. Now, don't get me wrong, I'm not knocking the gym. You know, if many of you out there probably love your gym workouts, and if that's you, then that's awesome. Go for it. If you're looking for something to do to keep yourself fit and healthy in your later life, then checking out a gym might be for you. Just because it didn't jive with me doesn't mean it's not for you after all. You know, and to be fair, if I went back now, it would probably be a very different experience to what I had 20 years ago. So going back to my original point, it wasn't the gear that kept me running. In fact, it wasn't even the running. In fact, the first run that I did was so difficult, I almost gave up before I even began. What happened was I found a community of people that had similar values. There were slow runners and fast runners, competitive runners and casual runners, people of all kinds of ages and backgrounds that just loved running. It became more than just running, and over the months and years of making great friends, I became active in all kinds of ways. I got into hiking, I got into cycling and trail running. You know, from time to time we'd do a brew run where we'd find a brewery, go for a run, come back and have beer, food and great conversation. It became more about being active as a way of life rather than trying to fit exercise into my life. And so this is not going to be a running channel, although I will make more videos about running because running was the start of my active later life. But what I really want to do is encourage us all to be active in our later lives, whatever form that might take. We're going to try new things, maybe take an active approach to travel, or look at how being active is going to be beneficial to our daily lives. Maybe review some products that can help us live an active life. You know, just because we're getting older does not mean that we have to start winding down. And I'm especially hoping that we can all encourage one another, especially if you're like me who didn't really take being active seriously in our younger lives, but are discovering now that it's never too late to start. And so before I wrap up, I want to talk about the run that I did the second week. I had my nice new running shoes. I had a lightweight shirt that didn't soak up sweat and get heavy like my previous shirt did. And I felt a lot more comfortable, but in the end, the run still hurt almost as much as it did the first time. I still wanted to collapse at the end, and it was very painful, but it was great to be back with new friends. And I actually met somebody afterwards who told me that as a new runner, maybe I should just slow down a bit, especially at the beginning, and run at a pace that I can have a conversation as I'm running. And don't worry if it feels really slow, because over time, I'm going to start seeing massive improvements. He also suggested to me that maybe I go out a couple of times a week just to get my body used to running. And you know what? That guy was right. I was transformed to somebody who could barely run a 5K to somebody who's about to run his second marathon at the age of 53. You know, I think a lot of us when we get older, we kind of forget that when we try something new, we're just not going to be that good at it. You know, we spent our whole lives developing our skills and our crafts and our careers that we're actually pretty good at the things that we've been doing for a living. And so when we try something new, we kind of expect it to be the same when in fact it won't be. So I think sometimes we get frustrated with ourselves because we try this new thing and we're just not that good at it, and we start comparing ourselves with other people, and those people have been doing it for years and years and years. And so we get into this negative mind trap, and it makes us think that this is not for me, and so we just give up. And I got thinking, maybe back in my 30s when I tried to go to the gym, one of the things that may have caused me to give up was the fact that I was possibly comparing myself to those Arnold Schwarzenegger lookalikes that could just lift heavy weights and I could barely lift a thing. And I feel like maybe on week 1 or week 2 when I was like trying to keep up with the middle of the pack runners that looked like my age, those guys have been running for years and they knew how to do it and their bodies were used to it and mine wasn't. And had I not learned that lesson earlier on, I probably would have given up on this too. I'd love to hear your stories about the challenges that you had to overcome when starting your active later life, especially the ones that you had to overcome and the lessons that you learned, because I think those stories will actually help a lot of people as they live in their active later lives. And please like and subscribe if you like this content, and I'll see you again in the next video.